You have fought these things for thousands of hours. You know their attack patterns, their weaknesses, their drop tables. Some of you have defeated TzKal-Zuk. Some have dared to attempt all combat achievements and lived. But at some point, did you ever stop and actually look at them and just kind of think, how big are they? Because some of these bosses are enormous. When you start putting actual numbers to it, things get strange. Jad, who most of us remember as the wall of nightmare fuel we faced in our first fire cape attempt. Genuinely massive. But TzKal-Zuk makes Jad look modest. But how big is big? Are we talking as big as a house? Maybe a building? Perhaps a skyscraper? Today we're finding out exactly how tall old school RuneScape's biggest bosses are in real terms.
The door method.
So how do we get a consistent measurement? Well, as the stinger mentioned, with doors. Have a look at the height difference between this door and my character, a little above head height. The average height of a human is about 1.7 meters, or about 5.5 feet. And the average size of a door is 2 meters, about 6.5 feet, which is just above the height of an average human. Therefore, it seems that in-game doors, or at least this one here, roughly reflect their real-life counterparts. And so, the door method is born. I placed each boss next to that reference, or I used consistent proportional scaling where direct comparison wasn't possible. We'll get to that in a second. And I worked out the height from there. One thing worth mentioning before we get into it, these aren't canon figures. This is an experiment, a consistent one, but an estimate. What it gives us is a way to compare these bosses to things we actually understand and engage with in real life.
Scarius.
Starting small, relatively speaking. Scarius, the Rat King. He lives beneath Verok's sewers, commanding a small army of giant rats. And for a lot of players, he's their first real boss encounter. When you first drop into that arena, he's imposing enough. Teeth, claws, and these nightmarish growths on his back. He comes in at around 2 doors, which is 4 meters, or 13.1 feet, roughly the height of a single-story house ceiling. Not the most frightening thing on this list, but we have to start somewhere.
Bryofighter.
Bryofighter, a bit of an optional encounter here. Many players have skipped this one completely, and that's a shame because she looks fantastic. This enormous moss-covered tree-like creature, she lands at about 1.5 doors, which is about 3 meters, 9.8 feet, roughly the standing height of a male camel, from the ground to the top of its hump. Not as terrifying, if you ignore everything else about it, that is.
The Cowfight Queen.
The Cowfight Queen has been in RuneScape since 2004. She was the hardest boss in the game for years. Hundreds of players showed up in her lair with full rune and absolutely no plan, and she ate them alive. Her first phase sits at 1 door, whereas its second phase sits at about 1.5 doors, with its feet almost hitting the ground. That would be around the same size as Bryofighter, at about 3 meters or 9.8 feet, roughly the height of a garage door.
Commander Ziliana.
4 God Wars dungeon bosses make the list, Commander Ziliana being the smallest. She's the leader of Saradomin's forces, intelligent, ancient, fast, and responsible for more Armadillo crossbow dry streaks than most of us want to think about. She fights at a speed that most bosses in the game can't fathom. Being an Icene, she is a bit larger than a normal human in proportion, which puts her at just above 1 door, at approximately 2.1 meters, or 6.9 feet. Nice.
General Grador.
General Grador is Bandos's most devoted general, and if you're not careful, he will destroy you. The boy's got hands. He's enormous in a way that feels immediately physical. The first time you walk into that room and he's just standing there, you understand why Bandos chose him. At 2 doors, or 4 meters, 13.1 feet, he's roughly the height of a large delivery truck, or approximately this many subscriber buttons. Hint hint, please subscribe.
Krill Tutsaroth.
Krill Tutsaroth, I'm definitely butchering that. Zamorak's general, 2 blades, horns, and a permanent expression of contempt. His head reaches the same height as Grador, but measuring from the ground to the top of his wings, he comes out at just under 3 doors, about 5.8 meters, or 19 feet. That's the height of 2 Sunliner Habitat compact multi-terrain motorhomes. Let's get to something even bigger.
Kriara.
Criara is a problem for this experiment because birds don't stand the same way that mammals do. And Criara isn't exactly a bird either. They're an aviancy. Enormous wingspan, talons, a beak, a body built for both flight and war. Measured from the ground to the top of their head, it is at 3 doors. However, with its wings fully extended, the height reaches about 4.5 doors. That puts them at 9 meters, or 29.5 feet. That's the size of about 5 very tall adults stacked on top of each other, or a 3-story house on the smaller side. It's actually insane.
TzKal-Zuk.
Right, Jad. For a lot of people watching this, TzKal-Zuk is the most memorable boss in the entire game. The first time you see him emerge, this enormous volcanic creature, one wrong move and you're a goner. He measures at just over 2 doors, almost 2.5, which puts him at about 4.5 meters or 14.7 feet. That's roughly the height of a mid-range industrial-size forklift at full extension, substantially larger than a fully grown African elephant. Think about that the next time you're managing those press switches. You're standing in front of something at the height of a small office building, and your only job is to click the right button within 0.6 seconds. But Jad isn't even close to the top of the list. Tekton. This monster is essentially the soul of a human merged with an immortal body capable of immense power. His shape is rather dense, wide and heavy, built like something that was designed rather than born. He comes in at almost bang on 3 doors, slightly under, which is about 5.9 meters or 19.4 feet, a bit shorter than the size of 2.5 shipping containers stacked on top of each other. If General Grador is a house, Tekton is a bunker. Zora is genuinely difficult to measure because she spends most of the fight partially submerged. What you're seeing is just the top section, head, neck, whatever you want to call it, and her tail emerging from the water. I measured the visible portions and tried to get a decent idea of how big this snake really is. The head and neck section stands at just under 2 doors at around 3.9 meters or 12.8 feet. The tail section we can see is just over 2 doors, 4.1 meters or 13.5 feet. The total estimated length, assuming it has a proportionate middle section, is at least 5 doors. I personally think closer to 6 doors, if fully stretched out, which is 12 meters, or 39.4 feet. That's roughly the height of an Airbus A319 tail section, around the height of a matured landscape palm tree. Remember, a snake you can't fully see is always more frightening than the numbers suggest.
The corporeal beast.
What about the corporeal beast? One of the older and stranger bosses in the game. A massive entity, part monster, part something the lore never fully explains. But by appearances, it doesn't seem to belong to this world. At just over 2 doors, it stands at 4.2 meters, or 13.8 feet, roughly the size of a small petrol station.
Galvek.
Okay, let's get to Galvek. If you haven't done Dragon Slayer 2, stop what you're doing because Galvek is the quest's final boss. A dragonkin experiment with immense power, essentially the most powerful dragon that has ever existed in the game. Its idle pose comes in at just over 2 doors, 4 meters or 13 feet. But this gets insane when fully extended. It actually goes beyond my ability to measure indoors, but I've got a good estimate. Fully extended, Galvek would be approximately 6 doors, which is 12 meters or just under 40 feet, around the size of a 3-story apartment block. The stuff of nightmares.
The Huey-Coatl.
Probably another name that I'm going to mess up, so bear with me. The Huey-Coatl is an enormous feathered serpent, a direct reference to the Aztec deity Quetzalcoatl. The design commits completely to the concept, feathered, coiling, and unfathomably massive. Measuring this boss is a bit complex. I first focused on the visible portion at roughly 3.5 doors, which is 7 meters or 23 feet at its peak. Then I looked at the implied full body length and the number got considerably higher. I estimated around 7.5 doors, which would be about 15 meters or almost 50 feet. That's about the height of a mid-sized commuter ferry or about 7 fully grown gorillas stacked on top of each other. Yeah, it's massive, but tiny compared to the next one.
The Leviathan.
The Leviathan is probably the most visually impressive of the Desert Treasure 2 bosses. An enormous sea creature, something between a sea serpent and an ancient deep sea predator, living in the Scar, a place that brings death to most who find it. This monster is partially submerged. See, the Leviathan, although huge, is mostly below you and around you. Its visible height, when extended, is at about 4 doors, which is 8 meters or 26 feet. But if you look at the arena, you will see that its body wraps around you under the water. Using this design art as a reference, I tried to estimate the total height this beast could be and came to a whopping 88 meters or 289 feet. That's 11 times the size of the visible portion's height. Very, very rough estimates here, but it's about the size of a small skyscraper. An example I have for you guys is where I'm from in Sydney, Australia. This building here in the city stands at exactly that height. There's a moment when this boss appears where you understand instinctively that this is something that should not exist in a world built to human scale. But what about this one?
TzKal-Zuk.
Okay, let's come back down to the surface for a second. What about TzKal-Zuk? Phase 1, she's seated on a throne. Phase 2, mobile but roughly humanoid in structure. Phase 3, she transforms into a massive spider creature. Phase 3, TzKal-Zuk stands at just over 2 doors, about 4.1 meters or 13.5 feet, about the size of a small traffic light pole. There's a reason the Theatre of Blood has such a high ceiling.
Soul Heredit.
Soul Heredit is the final boss of the Fortis Colosseum, a gladiator champion who's ancient and deeply patient. He's also large, at about 3.5 doors, 7 meters or 23 feet. That puts him at roughly the size of a 2-story suburban house, or a small church. The Colosseum is built for spectacle, and Soul fits it perfectly.
The Great Olm.
The Great Olm is the final boss of the Chambers of Xeric, a terrifying deity assumed to be a dragonkin creation, sealed away beneath Mount Quidamortum. His design is immediately striking, enormous, pale, with massive claws and a head that moves independently of the rest of him. What you see during the fight is just the head and claws. His body is hidden beneath the chamber floor. The visible portion when stretched out, so its neck and its head, measures at 3.5 doors, 7 meters or 23 feet, the size of Soul from just a moment ago. That's just the neck up. This thing is huge. Luckily, we have the Olmlet Pet, which gives us an idea of what this boss would look like in full. Based on proportional estimates from that pet, the full Olm would be about 3 times the size, bringing it to 10.5 doors, 21 meters or 69 feet. Nice. That is about the size of a 6-story hotel, although I don't think I'll be checking in.
TzKal-Zuk.
TzKal-Zuk, the final boss of the Inferno. One of, if not the, most mechanically difficult encounters in old-school RuneScape's history. The Infernal Cape is a genuine status symbol in the community. His visible height from around his knee to the top of his head is approximately 3 doors, 6 meters or 19.7 feet. Like Olm, we're only seeing part of it. Zuk's lower legs are embedded in the arena floor, but I would estimate his total height would be around 4 doors, which is 8 meters or 26 feet. A big boss for a big accomplishment. So where does that leave us? Well, the top of the list is dominated by the Leviathan, coming in at an insane height that matches a small skyscraper. However, like in the Leviathan's case, the complication is with the bosses that aren't fully visible. Whether bosses like Zuk, Zulrah, Olm, or the Leviathan are technically larger or smaller depends entirely on what you're willing to assume about the parts hidden from view. One thing is for sure though, some of these bosses are freaking enormous, truly nightmare-inducing. I hope I've given you something interesting here. I decided to make something a bit different to my usual content. If you enjoyed, let me know. I might make something similar in the future. Be sure to subscribe for more. See you soon in another video. Goodbye.